Hi, I'm Leah from Patchwork Picnic, and this is my first tutorial to show you how to get started on the hare in the fox pattern, the turning of the seasons. So I'm going to start on page 1. So you need to get a guide sheet, just regular paper, and your cutting sheet, which is of a thicker card or thicker paper. We're going to go through how we cut, wrap and then join these pesky irregular shapes and give you lots of confidence to get you going. So I've got my 2 printouts. I've got the one I'm going to cut on slightly thicker paper, and I've got the one I'm going to use as my map or guide on thinner paper. I'm just going to leave that one there for the moment. So I'm going to start cutting around this area to get the shapes. So I follow the lines coming down. Now really, other than the edge pieces where they need to line up with the next pages, you could be quite relaxed with how you want to cut. If you wanted to make a shape different to how it's been printed out, go ahead. The only times it would be problematic is if you change the shape around here where it goes to grey, because those need to line up with the next page. I'm going to cut out a few shapes in one go. I might come in from this corner as well. Starting with page 1. It's not essential, you can start wherever you want. But I think page 1 has got quite a few simple shapes to get you going. Okay, there we go. Now some of these little shapes, they're done to introduce, you know, different fabrics. If you want to add a little bit of pattern here and there. If you don't want to add pattern, you can make the shapes larger. You know, you could kind of cut across, do a big triangle and then fill in a triangle there. It's really up to you. So I'm cutting out a few navy shapes to start with. I'm going to wrap a few of those all at the same time. I'm just going to use one colour, but like I said, you can go ahead and use as many different fabrics of the right colour scheme as you like. Okay, so I'm cutting up to the black line. Okay, there's my offcut. So here are my few shapes. Get my navy fabric. Move those out of the way. So, okay, a bit of a frayed edge around there, so I'll come back to that afterwards. So, I'm going to lay my shape on my fabric. Just press it in the right place. Leave enough room to cut off that little frayed edge there. And I'm literally going to cut around it. I mean, I'm going to do it pretty neatly, but I'm not going to be measuring it or drawing around it. I think it will take absolutely ages to create if you become that precise. So I'm just going to cut the rough shape around it. I'm just going to cut off this frayed edge. Okay. On to the next one. So I'm leaving, I don't know, that's under 1 centimetre probably, but over half. So that's probably about, we'll go for 7mm roughly. I'm not quite sure what that is in inches. Okay. Do this down here. On larger shapes, I would leave larger gap around the edge for folding and wrapping. Smaller, smaller. Okay, we'll go with those 3 to start with. Come back to those. Okay. So obviously it's the front with the number that we want to wrap over. Now, in this instance, the pattern is, you know, both sides. But if I had a pattern that was just printed on it, then actually when you were cutting it, you would flip the fabric over and cut round it that way. Okay, so we've got our shape, and then just begin the process of folding. This is when I love having long nails. Fortunately, my nail broke the other week. So now I baste at the corners. I don't baste through the paper, it's harder. Plus you have to go through afterwards and remove it. And really, I'm all for an easy life. Never tried gluing, but because I do most of my sewing in front of the TV, I just think I get in an absolute mess. So I corner baste on the back. Now, when I've got 2 in, I make sure that I push this shape really tight and really fold that over, almost doing like a bit of a twisty. I push up that way and I pull down that way to get the corner really tight. Not the neatest there on that corner, but it'll be hidden. I tend to do the first stitch off the corner, coming out through into the stitch where it's folded over. I think this came from when I had particularly thick fabric once. And it's always thinner here and easier to push through there. Okay, that's our first shape. I will just do an extra little stitch there. Okay, so we've got a nice tight shape. This was quite a square shape, so I wasn't too worried about where I started. On some of the pointier shapes, I have a preference, which I will show you. So let's just bring our guide back in here. Okay, now this is where we just keep it stored on the guide. For this shape, it's quite obvious, but as you work through it, maybe these leaves, for example, where they're much more similar, you place it on it as you go, and then you won't get confused where it should be. So we'll just leave that one there for the moment, move on to the next one. Okay, so again, I'll put that behind. Okay, so this is a little bit pointier here. Now, it's my preference then to go for the slightly wider angle. Okay, so always trying to make it as tight as possible. Now, I taught myself just from reading a book how to do English paper piecing, and I'm sure I probably haven't learnt it necessarily the best way, and everybody else seems to develop their own hints and techniques. So this is just how I do it. I'm not saying this is the only way to do it. Okay, so here on this last corner, so I'm really going to twist that way and sort of pull this fabric this way, so it's almost creating like a bit of a twist when you're getting that angle. And then I do use my nails a lot, this one and this one, to just really push that in. And then again, pulling this over at the top and pushing it behind to create a twist. Just tuck that in there. Okay. Just going to push this into this corner just to keep it nice and tight. And I'll move on to the next one. See, this corner here just slipped towards the edge. So again, push it into that corner, grasp this corner, and then, you know, try and keep it quite tight as you're doing it. Okay, again, push this into that corner. Fold that over, grasp that tightly, fold that over. Okay, so for this last corner, I'll do a bit of that rolling, so pulling that way and pulling that way at the same time. Fold that over. Nice tight shape. A bit far to the side there. Okay. Oh, I've just gone through there. That's okay. Snip. Okay, so then we line it up on our sheet. So again, I'm going to start with my widest angle. Fold this over. Fold that one over. Just make sure there's a nice edge down there before you commit. Pull that one. Grasping that tightly, fold that over, do that pulling this way and pulling that way, so you're doing that real pinch. Fold that one over. And again, that sort of rotating, pulling that way and pulling that way. So there we've got some navy shapes. Just going to go on, do a few more different colours, and then we'll join some together. I'll just remember this number. So this is a leaf 64. Starting with the widest angle. Push it in, and that one, fold it over. So I'm going to start with the leaves. So I'm just going to take these bottom two here. I'm just going to move this out of the way. Now I know these are the right way around because I tested it. And I'm just going to use a deliberately contrasting thread so it's easy to see what's going on. So I'm going to start off by turning them to face each other, and I know that it's this edge here that I want to line up. So I'm lining up, just going to pull those so we can see all the way across. And I'm going to start in this corner, right in the corner. Now you could try ladder stitch or flat back stitched to sew these together. I don't. I try and find a good matching thread, because what is already a time consuming and long project will double in length, I think, if you start using those, but ultimately it would look better, and if you are spending lots of time on a project, that might be your preference. For this demonstration, I'm just going to do the normal stitch, which is where we go from across the top. My thread bunching up a bit. Okay, so we've lined up the corners, and we're just going to sew all the way across the top, hopefully without the thread knotting. Has a tendency to do. Actually, it's not completely contrasting, is it, this thread? Okay, so we're going all the way through. So when you're normally sewing shapes together which are the same size, it's obviously much easier to line them up. With these, you just have to ensure that the edge you're sewing together completely lines up all the way across. These leaves are actually quite similar. Normally I'm a bit closer to my eyes, so I'm sewing at a bit of a distance, a bit harder. Now the points is where you have to try and get nice, sharp, neat corners. And I have discovered that the best way to do this is to make sure that you leave you coming quite tight, but I'll explain that when I get there. Okay. Okay, so now we're getting to the end. Just going to open it out to see where my point is. Okay, so we want to be aiming for about here. It's more pronounced on the one that's a bit wider than the one that's a bit pointier. So as I get there, roughly here, I'm going to start just actually putting my needle a bit further into the fabric, because if you stay just taking a few threads, you won't get such a good point. You need to actually push it in a little bit more. Okay, so this is probably the last one, so I'm going to make sure I go in quite far. Okay, I'm just going to knot it. now I'm going to get the next one, which goes across like that. Okay, and then when we sew it, what we try and do is we want to almost cross this end point over the top, because we want this area here to be as thin as possible. So actually, if you just see, if you cross that over the top, that's what we'll be aiming for. And that's, you get that by, if I just show you, this will be at the end, I'm just showing you in advance. You actually move it in quite far, and then you can line it up with the other one, and then when you open it out, you'll get quite a sharp point. So make our way across. Now, one thing I found out when you're selecting the colour of your thread, if you don't have an identical colour to the one side that you're sewing, try and match the tone of the fabric you're sewing. So that's the light and darkness. So for example, I always regret not buying a darker purple when I was sewing the purple elements. In fact, I chose a more mauve shade, and because it's lighter, even though the colour is the same, it is much more pronounced than I would like it to be. If I had chosen a grey, for example, that was tonally the same as the shades of purple, that would have worked much better than matching the actual colour but a lighter version. So I've zoomed in for this end bit, so you get a nice clear shot of how to make the central shape nice and pointy. You can see this is where we're going now. Ideally, we just want this one to fold in to meet this one, so the central one stays pointy. So I'm just starting to position this very slightly over towards that shape, which is about 1 millimetre or so inwards. It's handy to learn how to adjust your shapes. Sometimes for no reason don't quite line up. Okay, so I'm just going to come in a little bit on this one here. And then this last one in this corner, I want to come in to meet this one here. Put that one through there first, and then I'll put it through the one we're sewing, right up next to the previous one we sewed. Okay, and then you can see it's made a great point there. I'll just finish that off. Not knotting it. Okay, so there you can see we've got our 3 leaves sewn together, and there's a lovely tight sharp point on that one there. So going to get my piece of branch. This one lines up with this top one here, and then there is another shape which I haven't actually wrapped, which carries on down here. So I'm just going to line that up here. So our guide will be this corner here. So there we go. If you imagine where the edge of the shape is on this one, you know that it's going to be right where that turns over. So if you just fold that back out of the way. Goes through. Okay, so that's our starting point, and then we move our way down. Okay, and getting through to the end. Okay, fold our tails out of the way, and you can see the end of that. It's going to be probably around here by the time we consider all the three shapes bunched together. Okay, so this one, and that one there, and then I just open it up to have a look. Because we've done a nice point, this one is effectively right there next to it, but I think we're just going to do another little stitch right here, along. Corner bit there, that's right. Dreaded bunch. There we go. Okay, so then we can slot the next one in there afterwards. We can see that butts up nicely there. On. From our plan, you know that this one goes along this one here. So again, I line it up, and then flip it over to line up this side, and then again, really, we want to basically almost go through the orange. We want it so close, so we keep a point. So we're really butted right up next to that orange. Go all the way through. Don't let the shapes dictate to you where you sew. It's up to you. You know, sometimes the thickness of the fabric can soften the corners, and you have to take steps to resharpen and redefine those points. Yep. So we're broaching the point again. Start just moving in very slightly, because really we want our needle to finish dead in the middle of here, so the next one will also finish in the same place. Could be a bit more, a bit more than that. I think it'll probably be fine. Okay, so I'm just going to put this one to one side, and I'm going to start on our group of navy. So now we're ready to join these two together. We'll start off by lining up where we want this grey to go in the corner. So we want it to go right here, right next to where this point joins up and where the orange joins up. So we get a really nice, neat point. So push it through there and then push it through the shape we want to join. Okay, now I always tend to sew from the middle outwards when I'm joining sections. If you start from the edge, it can shift as you're sewing along it. Okay, I'm just going to have a look where I want this corner. Just needs to line up with this here. It's falling short very slightly, so I'm just going to pull it to where I want it. Just see that is then adjusting. So just to keep it next to it, I'm going to turn it inwards like that. Okay, so we're just getting to where we want a point to meet up. Keep an eye on where it should be. Get closer in case any last minute adjustments. And then these aren't hugely pointy points, so I don't think we need to eat in too much on those. That one there. And then this side, so we want that one to line up, which looks like it's pretty good. Fold it over. Now I don't use really thick cardstock when I'm printing out my papers. Having a thinner one means that you can fold them over without too much problem. I use about 120 GSM, which is just like a thicker than normal printer paper. Easily prints out as well. You can't reuse it for this project unfortunately, but I certainly, when I'm doing diamonds or hexagons, I certainly reuse my papers then. You get a couple of goes out of it before they start losing their shape and becoming a bit wrinkled. You can definitely print on the back of your guide layers though, so you get a couple of uses out of those. Right, just making sure that's going to work at the end there. I'll probably stitch about roughly every millimetre. Don't know how that translates to inches, I'm afraid. Okay, fold the flaps out the way. Now this is a pointy shape, so we'll want to finish in a little bit so that we can achieve a nice point. So I'm just going to come in to where I'm pretty sure the centre would be. Oops. And then line it up slightly inwards on that one. Okay, there we go. Finished section. So I hope you found that useful. And it's given you a little bit of confidence to tackle those irregular pieces. I'm planning on another tutorial to deal with the tiny fiddly areas around the fox's face, so keep an eye out for that one. But most of all, enjoy it and get going.